Our second local yokel story tonight will be presented by Audrey Carter. Audrey?
Okay, it's a little hard to follow that act. Here we go. So, we'll start. I bet that got your attention. And that was the intention of the whistle, which was part of the equipment used by the Surry Police. So, believe it or not, there was a Surry Police Department. It was a volunteer group. And they were in existence from 1980 to 1987. The slide here shows a badge that each one wore. And if you notice over here, there's also another patch, which is a flag and a badge for a constable, and some other items we'll talk about as we go along. So, in 1979, a group of citizens met to discuss what could be done about the increased vandalism and harassment in the town. They decided a volunteer police department might be the solution. The following March, Surry townspeople approved a warrant article to provide funding for this police force. Prior to this time, Surry had a constable who helped maintain the peace. Russell Stevens had served in this capacity for many years. So on April 9, 1980, Wilbur Saunders, Greg Stanley, and Lauren, otherwise known as Bud, Small went to Augusta and purchased a 1978 Plymouth Cruiser. And routine patrols began that very day. So this slide shows a picture of the second cruiser they purchased, which was a 79 Pontiac. In front is David Hooper, Joy Small's son, and Tina, the friendly family dog. You can see this car has a logo on it, and also a light on the roof. So this is the emblem that was removed from the door of the first police vehicle. And there's another, the other door is displayed up over there. So, the police force was well organized. They had bylaws that described their purpose as follows. The purpose of the Surry Police Association is to contribute to the betterment of the town of Surry, to be a symbol of law enforcement to the town, to protect persons and property, to preserve the peace, to apprehend the criminal, and to aid the injured. To hear a different perspective on the department, I will share with you a passage from an article written by Wendy McNeil in 1982. She was a 5th grader in Mrs. Guilford's class here at Surry. Wendy's father, Tim McNeil, worked for the Hancock County Sheriff's Department. She wrote, "My dad also helped the Surry Volunteer Police Department, which started in the fall of 1979, to help the Sheriff's Department lower the crime rate in Surry. The Surry Police Department is basically set up as an eyes and ears operation. If the patrol sees any major crime, or if an arrest has to be made, they call the Sheriff's Department. When a family plans a trip or will be gone for a night, the Surry Police Department will keep an eye on their home. The Surry Police patrol every night. They check all summer camps for break-ins, and they take care of clam licenses. Bud Small is the chief." The Surry Department did work closely with the Hancock County Sheriff's Department. When a call came into the dispatcher at the Sheriff's office, it would be relayed to the Surry Volunteers. If a case was difficult, the Surry Police would call the Sheriff's Department for assistance. The volunteers met once a month at the home of Lori, or Bud, and Joy Small. The minutes of the meeting were faithfully recorded by Ann Sawyer. The volunteers fell into 2 groups: volunteer police, also known as constables, and riders. The constables had to meet criteria set by the state of Maine. Riders did not need to have the same certification. Each patrol included both a constable and a rider. The volunteers and riders were scheduled by Joy Small. Some members of the force informed me that Joy often scheduled her daughter Jane with Scott Blackham. Eventually, Jane and Scott were married. Was Joy playing Cupid?
That's why I don't volunteer for anything anymore.
What can you say? Was it, oh, it's the truth though, wasn't it? From the notes Ann took, it is clear that thievery was a problem. At the November 4th, 1981 meeting, the group voted to buy a new crystal. However, in the minutes of the March 4th, 1982 meeting read, the crystal for the scanner came, but was stolen at Bucky's before we picked it up. So Bucky was Melvin Buckingham, and I think he's not recorded as a rider, but he must have been closely associated. Meeting notes have no information about patrolling activities of the group. They focus on raising money, purchasing equipment, and serving the community. Each year, the town of Surry appropriated money for the volunteer police. However, the group expended a great deal of effort to support themselves. They had a canoe raffle. Let's see, there's a copy of the ticket for the raffle. And it was a 17-foot Old Town canoe, and which was won by Peter Grimaldi. So nearly every year, they also held a yard sale and a chowder supper. Both events were very successful, as proceeds are reported to be between $600 and $1,000 for each event. They also received donations from people who wanted to support them, who had received help from them. And among the papers, there were numerous thank you notes and offers for donations. There were numerous volunteers, both as constables and as riders. The following were constables: Greg Stanley, Jane LaVoy, William Cadu, Rob Giffen, John House, Robert Rosie, Gary Beal, Ray McDonald, Lee Cousins, Richard Gorman, Richard Gibson, Richard Gasper, John Riley, Deborah Saunders, Joel Guilford, Vincent Williams, Jim West, and Lauren Small. And the following were riders: Scott Blackham, Ann Sawyer, Naomi Williams, Al Black, Russ McBreen, Harry Locke, Alex McGraw, Joyce Small, Olive Gibson, Bob Shannon, Lois Shannon, Delmar Buzzle, Don Cullinane, Jane Nesbitt, and Ed Caden. So that's a lot of involvement, and I think many people were involved for a short time, but some of them were, with the force the whole time it was in existence. So we were able to invite a few of these members tonight, and out in the audience I can see Joyce Small, who scheduled the patrol and hosted the meetings and was also a rider. Bill Cadu and Ray McDonald, who were both constables, Scott Blackham and Rob Giffen, who were riders. Anybody else up there? In addition, let's see, Louise Talkington is here. She is the daughter of Ann Sawyer. So if any of you have some incidents or stories you'd like to share, we'd invite you to do that now. And you can, if you have a loud voice, you can speak from your seat, but people prefer the microphone so that everyone can hear. Anybody? Bill? And Louise, go?
Let Louise go first.
Let Louise go first? Okay.
I'm not young.
Oh.
So that,
Can you hand her the microphone?
I think so.
thank you. My mother was Ann Sawyer, and she rode a lot with Bud. And every once in a while, they'd let Joy get in the cage and ride with them in the evening. And also, I lost my train of thought when I said that. My sister would sit home with a scanner when my mother was out, and there was a TV ad, a public announcement, that would say, "Where are your children?" It's 11 o'clock at night. And my sister would say, "Oh, everybody has kids, but I have my mother I have to worry about at 11 o'clock at night."
Well, for one thing, whatever the state required, it couldn't have been much if I was a constable. It started because of trouble right here in downtown Surrey. And it was interesting to go out and actually get to meet some of the people in town, spend time with them. Bob Rosie, I can remember, he and I would ride a lot together. There was one time down on the neck, we found some kids drinking, so we brought the alcohol back with the vehicle. I came the next day and asked Bud about it, and he said he drank it, so that was it. But we used to have quite a few break-ins in a snowstorm, and I think that trimmed that down quite a bit. And basically, having all the Canes live in town has kept the town pretty well protected since then.
I want to add something to what Bill was talking about. When I was in college at the Maine,
Come on, Eric.
when I was in college up at UMaine, Orono, we decided one weekend we were going to come home, and it was snowing to beat the band. A good old snowstorm. Well, Billy Leaf came with us, and his road hadn't been plowed. So he said, don't worry, I'll just trudge through the snow and get to my house. So he got to his house, and he's there, getting cleaned up, getting himself something to eat, and all of a sudden he sees, what are those floodlights? And all these floodlights are looking in the windows at him. And he's like, hello, can I help you? And it was Bud Small. And he said, we had information about a break-in. He says, well, I live here. So they were really quite, they made sure that the community stayed safe.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, so, yes.
I have a question. Why was the force disbanded in 1987?
I am going to get to that.
Okay.
Okay. So, for those people who are here that were on the force, at the end, we'd sort of like to get a picture of you. And right now, I would just like everybody to give a applause for those people, a little late, but maybe. Will this get turned off? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, excuse me. Okay, so although there's no patrol information in the minutes of the meetings, we do have an actual report available. So here, I have a copy of an actual ticket that was written out. And here I have the actual report. So I'm going to read the arrest report. Bud Small was the arresting officer, and the offendant was a young man who was 19 at the time. So this is what Bud writes. I was traveling east on Route 172 in Surrey in the vicinity of the Surry Inn. Mr. X was traveling west when he crossed the center line fully on my side of the road. I used the shoulder of the road and the entrance to Ed Caden's driveway to avoid a collision. He went back across the road on his side, and as I was turning in the Surry Inn driveway, I could see from my rearview mirror that he was crossing the center line back and forth several more times. I radioed the Hancock County Sheriff's Office for a possible 1053 going west on Route 172 in Surrey. As I was coming up on him, he pulled over to the right-hand shoulder of the road and stopped before I got to him. I then turned on my blue lights and radioed in the registration number to HC Hancock County Sheriff's Office. As I got out of the cruiser, he got out of his car on the driver's side, using the door to steady himself. I walked up to him and spoke to him. His speech was very slurred. I immediately looked into his car with my flashlight and observed a passenger passed out on the passenger side of the front seat. I then asked Mr. X for his driver's license and also for his registration. He had a problem giving me the driver's license and he could not find the registration. I then radioed Hancock County Sheriff's Office, gave them the name of the subject and what the situation was. They told me that there was no deputy in the immediate area and asked if I could handle it all right. I said yes and proceeded to do so. I asked him if he had been drinking and he said no. I then asked him to walk the white line on the edge of the pavement, which he had a problem trying to do. I then asked him to touch his nose with one finger from first one hand and then the other, which he was unable to do. At that point, I told him he was under arrest for OUI. He then told me that he refused to go. I then took him by the arm, led him to the cruiser with no problem. At this point, I radioed Hancock County Sheriff's Office that I was 1019 with a 1046. Mr. X was very unsteady going up the steps to the Hancock County Sheriff's Office. There he was taken care of by the deputies on duty, where he refused to take a test. There was a strong odor of intoxicating liquor on his breath. So you can see they did have some cases.
I have a question about
Yeah.
that. What happened to the young woman?
Well, I don't know if it was a woman. Oh, what happened to the other
what happened
passenger?
to the other person? And did he get both of the two drunk people into his car?
You know, I don't know, because it doesn't tell. Maybe they called someone to come get the other person. I couldn't tell you. It would be interesting to know, but I hadn't thought about that. Okay, so it doesn't appear that handcuffs were needed for that arrest, but they were supplied with them, as this is a pair, and it does say Surry PD on it. Okay, in the 82-83 town report, Bud wrote, because of the fact that we feel it very important to have a good relationship with our young folk, in December we hosted a Christmas party at the community building for the elementary school and preschool children of Surry. The police department continued to sponsor these parties through 1986. Among the gifts provided were pens, pencils, and notepads with the name Surry Volunteer Police Department on them. I have a note here from a Surry student. So, dear policeman, thank you for very much for the party last Saturday. I love seeing Santa and opening the piñata. I look forward to the party every year. Thank you again, your friend, Libby Wixon. And maybe some of you know Libby. Libby is Libby Bishop. She's one of the elementary school teachers at the Surry School. In the information on the Christmas parties, we found a recipe for peanut butter fudge. Some of us used that recipe to provide some of this evening's refreshments. There are also copies of the recipe available for you to take home. This slide shows the recipe, and the original recipe is also on the board up front. In 1986, the volunteer policemen published a calendar that was distributed to the citizens of Surry. One goal was to make sure that everyone had phone numbers for both the Hancock County Sheriff's Office, for the ambulance services in Ellsworth and Blue Health. And this is a copy of the calendar. So it doesn't have a lot of pictures. We were hoping, you know, to see some pictures of Surry policemen, but they do have the information and they did give this out to citizens. for the group to maintain as constables, primarily due to the requirement for taking a 100-hour course, and also because of the time involved in patrolling. From the meeting notes in January of 1987, we read, "No schedules this month. As there were so few constables, all constables have to qualify, and so that leaves only 2 constables. Joy suggests each constable get his own driver. And also, the time may be coming when we, or the town, will have to hire police." In November of 1987, the organization reports a balance of $1,130.87 in its bank account and has a discussion on what to do with the money. As I quote, "We are going to be forced to give up our police work due to lack of constables. Bud has told selectmen he will do this until March town meeting." They voted not to have their annual Christmas party. The group decided to use the remaining money to give an annual Good Citizenship Award of $50 to a graduating 8th grade from the Surry Elementary School. And I would just like to thank Joyce Small in particular for providing me with a lot of information and also all the artifacts that we use tonight.
Thank you. That explains why we have this Good Citizenship Award with an unknown reserve fund that we had no idea where it came from, and that's where it came from because it's still in effect.
I was saying they did start it, and I'm not sure. I think eventually other organized joined together, other organizations.
There's a small amount that's in a reserve fund, and we had no idea, and now we know. So, thank you.
And I will say, to sort of repeat what Bill Cadu said, I also think that by the time they disbanded, things had settled down in town, and the presence of the police force really had accomplished its goal. So, yes.
Yes, I had a question. I had heard a moose story involving the police department. Could you tell us that?
Yeah, I skipped that somewhere, I don't know why. So, at the meetings, refreshments were always really important. But there is one meeting where that reads, well, I don't know if I can find it. Okay, here. At the July 27, 1984 meeting, Ann wrote, "Delmar and Joy left to see a moose swimming in the bay. While they were gone, we had refreshments."
I have a question.
Yes.
Ted Fletcher from Newbury Neck, and my mother bought our house property back in 1975. We knew all about this because Dick Gibson was a high school friend of my father's and lived right next door. But I'm curious, we heard here in this room about 3 years ago from the author of the Oatmeal Stories all about Russell Stevens and what a scoundrel he was.
And father. And father of the authors.
I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing on this side. And I wondered where he was during all this police work.
Okay. So I sort of had the same question, and his name, we looked at some of the town reports, and he was the constable for a long time before.
Yeah.
I kind of thought maybe he was ready to get done because I knew from, growing up that he was probably fairly old. So it looks like he was around 70. He'd probably done it long enough. I suspect, particularly if there was a lot more going on, that he was kind of happy to step down and let somebody else take charge. It also was a volunteer position. He was not compensated for it. So, sometimes there comes a point.
Thank you very much.
Someone else.
Russell was the head foreman of the Union River Telephone Company, so that was taking up a lot of his time. And Bobby, his son, who wrote the Oatmeal Story, took his place. And the Oatmeal Story is talking about Russell. He protected your thing because he was the one that he was protecting you from. If they ran out of food, he knew where to go to get some. I mean, that's a tremendous, tremendous book, and it should be available. I mean, I thought it was one of the best reads. And I've known Bobby and his family for a long time. And all of those, I mean, Bobby he was a body man down the street from me for many years, and then when we replaced his dad at the Union River telephone company, and then his boys went on to become. So it's really a progression of, because Russell was caught robbing a bank at one point. So I mean, I think it was at the railroad office or something, but I mean.
Maybe it's like today, if you want someone who knows how to catch someone that does computer fraud, you hire someone who does computer fraud.
They used to do the same way with the game wardens too.
And we do still have a constable.
We do.
Well, Pat came, but he says he has no idea why he became constable. They just call him to come in and do the 2 things that a constable needs to do every year. So he posts the warrant for the town meeting.
So that's his only responsibility.
That's about it.
My mother back in the 70s made us all start to wonder about Russell because she lived in Maryland, but she come here for the summer, and she called Russell up, who was the caretaker, and said, it was on a Friday, and said, I'll be there Monday. And when she got there, he was there saying, I have very bad news for you. You've had a lot of antiques taken out of your house. We always kind of wondered at that point. But,
I think I remember that kind of from the oatmeal stories.
yeah.
Anything else? I'm going to turn it back to John.